just start. Great. Thanks, Rishabh. Thanks for doing this. So yeah, before we get started, if you can just walk us through who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Firstly, thanks for inviting me to do this. When you reached out, I think seemed interesting because like analytics plays a huge role in terms of the whole marketing aspect as well, right? So
Yeah.
thought it would be a very interesting sort of a discussion to understand things better and share what my thoughts are, of course, right? And I think brief introduction about myself. So I am the founder of WhitePath. So we are a marketing agency. I think we have been doing this for over 2 years right now, and now we have niched down into two core services where it's performance marketing and SEO. I think a sweet spot has been in terms of helping brands who are in the 0 to 1 scale or the 1 to 5 scale to find the sweet spot and scale aggressively, right? So we felt that we are really good in terms of hypothesizing what is not working, finding solutions around that, executing that really well, and then being very data driven and making the quick iteration, right? So we have developed systems and frameworks around this to find the quick feedback loop and make sure you're iterating to find the sweet spot very quick, right? So I think this is the sort of processes that we have focused on and done from the scratch, due to which, like, say, the majority of the brands that we worked with were the ones who were struggling working with consultants, marketing agencies, but like they weren't able to figure out the sweet spot because like you need this quick feedback and iteration loop to scale things up. So I think that's where, like, say, we played the role in terms of helping brands achieving that quickly. And then of course, like when that comes in, the retention angle kicks in. So like we have been with the school of that let's not focus on quantity, let's focus on quality. So as brands scale, we also grow, I think. So that's how we have looked at the whole growth aspect for WhitePath, and it's of course been a great journey so far. And yeah, of course, I come from a marketing background as well, where I started my career from college itself in the whole digital marketing space. I had done my undergrad in Christ University with like a specialization in data analytics. So that's where like some thoughts of how data works and how analytics works comes into the picture. And then post that is a lot of, like, say, I did a bunch of courses to learn things and experimented and sort of tried about a lot of things, right, very aggressively to get that quick feedback of what is working, what is not, how things work, right, to understand. So I think that's where a lot of sort of my experiences come in. And then of course, like, say, that's just like a brief introduction. I think like I as a person always felt that this was the right stream for me because it was the correct intersection of creativity, data analytics, plus a little bit of technology, right? So this was like the right sweet spot for me as a career field. And that's where like I was lucky enough to find a field that I love doing from scratch. So yeah, I think that's just a quick introduction about myself and WhitePath.
Awesome. And like, Rishabh, how did you
Yeah,
make that switch? So it makes sense that,
yeah,
you had a specialization in data analytics, you kind of had
yeah.
an interest in marketing, did a
Mhm.
job, right, for some time. Like, how did you make that switch? You know what, let me just go out and try to do this on my own. When did
Yeah,
that?
I think it was, I was working for another marketing agency for over 2 years where I was one of the initial employees there. So I was pretty much part of the end-to-end processes and part of the whole growth journey. That gave me a lot of context of how things work, how the whole marketing industry works, and like what exactly clients are again looking for, right?
Sure.
So of course, like then I started writing on LinkedIn, and then initial set of clients is through network or through people reaching out, and that's where things came in. And of course, like, see, once we started doing good work, referrals kicked in, and then eventually your clients refer other clients. So I think that's how we have grown. But yeah, that was the whole sort of moment
Sure.
where I doubled down into WhitePath completely.
Awesome. And in terms of your success or your outcome, right, was it something that you anticipated, or has it like surprised you in some capacity, both the way it's panned out or the way it breadth, whatever the problems?
Yeah, of course, right. I think like as a channel, it's evolved a lot. So like what were the strategies, etc., and the way we looked at whole marketing as a channel 2 years back is very different from how we used to look at two. And especially I started this when it was the whole startup boom as well, where like every startup cared about growth at all costs. So then the mindset about doing performance marketing was different than what it's now. So I
Sure.
think fundamentally, I think like that as a thing has evolved in terms of how startups and brands have started to look at marketing, and like how the whole uh, channels like SEO, performance marketing, and kick in as a whole brand building, and how you can build the recall aspect and make it a lot more sustainable, right? So I think that sort of has evolved as an aspect. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Understood. Understood. So basically, I think the fact that you started in the boom time of,
Yeah.
when that growth was there, right? Yeah. So you kind of rode that wave. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like you said, right, like the goals of marketing that time and now are kind of different, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think has changed? Like, I mean, this asking for a generic
Sure.
company, right? Let's say if I'm someone who, let's say, is wanting to spend or wanting to grow at this point in time,
Yeah.
I obviously don't have that kind of capital or dry powder, right? So
Yeah.
how has it changed for
So I
you?
think typically, like, I felt like the first cycle of the whole VC cycle has happened, right? Where like VCs have invested and they've gotten the feedback. So now a lot of theories have come in terms of like what VCs thought how Indian markets would work. Have gotten feedback. So typically, I think like biggest realization has been that in India, acquiring users is very low cost, right? But monetizing that is the biggest challenge for brands. And LTV as well. Like typically, again in the edtech, it's played out where people thought that the LTV is going to be very huge. So even if high customer acquisition costs, it's like
Mhm.
you're going to make your money over time, which didn't play out to play. So I think these are some sort of like say business model tweaks and business models understandings that brands have realized. Due to which now the whole marketing game has also changed in terms of how you're looking at acquiring better quality users and not just users at lowest cost, and then figuring out how you have like a much stronger funnel in place, right? Which will help you trickle down into higher conversions rather than just sort of having leaky funnels, right? So I think that sort of is like a moment shift that I've realized where like a slowly switch is happening. Yeah.
Got it. And when you meant that people are looking for higher quality of users, right?
Yeah.
Is that something that the brand has a strong hypothesis and then you work from it from there, or is it something that is also a recommendation that comes from your side? Because uh,
Yeah.
you're because the incentives are at opposite side, right? Like
Yeah.
let's say you're getting a fixed budget and you're asked to acquire a certain
Yeah.
set of users, right? It's in your incentives to get as many users as possible
Yeah.
for as low a CAC as possible. But for the brand, it might quite be possible that a certain set of users are not so great in the long term, right?
Mhm.
So how do you handle this uh, challenge or maybe competing incentives?
Yeah, I think like it's just in terms of being very upfront with the brand, right? In terms of what things have worked. So we show them like the clear picture in terms of how like I can drive a lot of users for you at the low cost, but whether they'll convert or not is like a secondary question that you always have to play out, right? So I give them a big picture saying that ideally it's better to drive better quality users where even if it's a higher cost, you have better chance of converting them and getting paid users out of it, right? So then eventually even your initial costs are high, your ROI is also going to be higher. So like that's something that we have a clear set of communication and to understand what they exactly want, and then give them an understanding that it is possible also to focus on like a lot of good quality users and scale it up over time sustainably rather than like say just blasting things out and like say acquiring at scale, right? And then realizing the churn is happening. So I think like we bring in our set of experience, our set of like say thoughts in terms of how that can be achieved, and then work with the clients, right? So I think like again that's where like we usually try to understand the client's objectives as well in the initial set of rounds to uh, understand what is their objectives, like say what do they want to achieve out of it, and then align, right? So again, if their goal is say that they want like end conversions, but if they are sort of feeling that acquiring a lot of users will help them achieve that, like say we upfront say that that's not going to happen. So that's why we will tell them like say even if it's a few set of users, we want to focus on like say driving good quality users, which will eventually help you that end goal. So yeah, I think it's a lot more about communications and realigning with what they have in terms of thoughts, and then giving them the clarity.
Got it. Got it. So, understood. So, does the incentives include quality as a factor in the way you get compensated? Like, let's say
Mhm.
there are two
Yeah.
agencies, right? One of
Yeah.
them does a lot of users, but let's say a lot of not so great users, and the other one has a higher quality of users, higher CAC, right?
Okay.
So on the prima facie, when you just run the campaign, it might look like one has done a better job than the other, right? Because
Yeah.
in terms of count. But let's say the other one has a better quality of users, and then it allows you to just play around that feedback loop, build a
Yeah.
better base, right? Uh, so how would like do you think current composite the way you guys get compensated or the way you guys get
Yeah.
paid for this, right? Does it take that into account, or is it purely basis, you know, referrals and word of mouth that what I worked with them 2 years back,
Yeah.
the kind of campaigns that we did is still working very well, thereby they recommend you and stuff. So how does it
Yeah,
work?
it's both cases, right? Like, say, of course, initially the way we work is like we work on flat retainers up to a certain spends, and then post that it becomes a percentage of the advertising spends, right? So, of course, like we are incentivized when it switches to the higher advertising spends, and then we make a percentage out of it. So, like, eventually, we win only when we retain the client, right? Beyond a certain point. So that's where, like, say, initially it's not like we have very high margins, but it's more focused in terms of proving the client that okay, fine, we know how to do things, and then in the certain time period we're able to achieve certain growth trajectory, and we prove that to them. And after that, it's a matter of like say things are working, then double and triple down, right? So I think that's how we have looked at how to sort of help brands grow. And yeah, of course, like say it's just the sole sweet spot, like say being patient and doing the right things, which has helped our existing clients as well get good results which they weren't able to achieve before, which eventually then trickles down into founders referring other to their other founder friends, and then that loop
Goes
going
on
in.
from there. Got it. So
Yeah.
let's say if I'm looking to launch a brand, right? I think
Yeah.
most customers would be consumer facing ones, right? Like
Yeah. We are more B2C, some
B2C,
B2B, but yeah, 80%
mostly B2C,
B2C.
right? So from let's say starting a campaign to let's say reaching some bit of maturity, right? Where
Mhm.
we've figured it out, or we would say you've cracked the code for the right sort of users and the spend is also optimal, right? Spending
Yeah.
anything incremental probably doesn't lead to a benefit in terms of LTV and all, right? So how
Mhm.
long does it typically take? How long does this journey typically take?
Yeah, I think like it typically takes us like 2 to 2.5 months to find a sweet spot, right? Where like we know that okay, fine, we have figured out the code in terms of these XYZ works, and then now it's a matter of doubling down these. So I think that has been the time period in from when we start to when we have figured out okay, fine, this are the things that's working well, and then some of these are the things that's not working well. So yeah, that's been the time
So
period when we have figured
roughly
out.
a quarter of a time period to arrive at
Yeah,
an optimal.
that's right.
Got it. Got it. And so because you've come from data and you're working with
Yeah.
marketing, right? Uh,
Hmm.
did you find the entrepreneurial side of things a little challenging? Were there specific
Hmm.
challenges which were difficult or something you didn't anticipate when you moved from a full-time job to running your own agency?
Yeah, of course. Like I think it's a lot of figuring out, right? Like say you have to figure out how to move things simultaneously, right? Where like hiring, marketing, sales, growth, everything has to happen simultaneously. So I think like say that's some of the things that I initially faced in terms of where I had to make sure equal time was allocated towards each of these functions and each of them were functioning smoothly, right? So I think there are a lot of systems and like say processes had to put into parts so that like they can sustainably run even without me having to be involved. So I think like say a lot of say just setting these things up, etc., were like a lot of figuring out to do, and then of course like you make a lot of decisions and then you reflect and then you figure out okay, fine, this are things that you could have done better. So I think like say I have in general been very reflective in nature. Of course, being in the whole industry, speaking to a lot of other agency founders, other like say startup founders, also gives me a perspective of how they're doing things, and then gives me a wider perspective, right? So I think these are some things that has, of course, helped me grow and evolve. And yeah, I did my fair share of mistakes as well as like a first time entrepreneur. But I think like yeah, I think it's constant feedback loop. I think one thing, of course, I've based on my conversation with founders has been that like say not everybody has the answers of what they're looking for, but it's just the mindset of like okay, I'll figure out, and then being very reflective and then taking the right decisions, right? And making uh, and being very executive on that, right? I think figuring out. So I think that's sort of a mindset is what I've tried to inculcate as well, where like uh, trying to figure out like say what are the things that needs to be worked on, and then constantly being very executive driven, and then work on each of the aspects in complete focus, right? As being the way that I've looked at the whole entrepreneurship journey. Yeah.
Got it. So basically, I think it's similar to what you already do with your current marketing role, right? Which is basically keep the loops very short.
Yeah,
Keep trying things out, and probably once you figure it out, you scale out the process.
that's right.
Understood. Understood. So, given your, working for all these years and working with different brands, right? Now that you have collected all these data points about what's happening in
Yeah,
different industries, different spaces and all, if you had to build something else other than
yeah.
WhitePath, if there was something else that you would be working on, what would that be?
Mhm. I think honestly, like uh, it would be something like it would be some product which already has existing demand. Like initially, my thoughts as an entrepreneur was like, say, like of course it's the premature thought, right? Like, okay, if you want to do a startup, it needs to be completely very different, etc. But I think now my thought process is that okay, fine, like not everything that you want to start up has to be completely different, completely unique, first in the market. It can also be catering to the existing demand which is already there, which has like a very huge demand, but then you focus on taking a huge like a small pie of it. Like even if you take a small pie in a very huge market, you will still make a lot of money, right? So I think
Mhm.
uh, my thought process has been in, if not this, sort of maybe double down into some particular industry which is pretty huge, but then focus on how to differentiate, how to sort of be very executive driven, how to sort of build a good brand would have been my approach to do things, and then I would have done something along those lines. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. And any specific domain or sector, given that, you're working as a growth person, right?
Yeah.
So you're actually seeing, how the market is perceiving, or uh, so sometimes the pull in the market is so strong that it just takes the product off your hands, right?
Yeah.
So given that, like, are there any specific domains that you think are very interesting, the way at least they're working out in Indian context, right?
I think like typically, uh, like we have worked with brands across sectors, but a lot more in the fintech space. So fintech in India is like very exciting, but you have to play the right game, right? Because like again, a lot of brands have realized that just adding technology to finance would not make it fintech, but you have to have like a core problem that you're solving for, and then it has to sort of have a value proposition that gets people to sort of trust you and invest, right? So I think fintech is huge as an opportunity in India. Healthcare is also huge. Work with some health tech brands as well. Then of course, right, I think like even in the D2C space, I think a lot of exciting things coming up. But I think what people have realized on the D2C front is like say acquisition costs are rising. So like I think ultimately it's a matter of how do you create a pull factor, right? Where like you create a brand which people want to brag about, and then they tell others about, and there's a pull factor, right? I think that's been the ultimate goal. Right. So yeah, I think these are some sectors that I feel I'm very bullish on, and sort of uh, see there a lot of opportunities in this field. Yeah.
Makes sense, makes sense. I think fintech, fitness and health, and then finally
Yeah.
I think D2C. D2C I think is the it's like really doing well, I think, because you have new distribution channels, you have your new companies, like quick
Yeah.
commerce
I
and all.
think D2C is also in like the D2C 2.0 right now, like where like whole concept of D2C was direct to consumer, but now actually D2C brands want to go to offlines, which
Yeah,
counterintuitive the whole concept of D2C, right? So I think like
yeah,
say
yeah, yeah.
technically it boils down to the whole aspect of like building a business and building a brand with like a
Right,
great product offering, right?
right,
So
right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I think it's kind of an evolution of the concept, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Got it, got it. So I think I'll switch to a little bit more of the data questions, right?
Yeah.
So so given that you started off as a data analyst and then turned into a marketing person, right?
Mhm.
How do you think that helps you differentiate compared to someone who's completely been a pure marketer, right? Doesn't have a background in data, right? So do you think
Yeah.
it gives you an edge, or do you think how does it change the way you think about problems or marketing in general?
Yeah, of course. I think like there were certain set of skill sets that I picked up when I studied data analytics as a field. So I think like uh, it gave me a lot more analytics, like say a lot more how to harness the data, right? Like mainly, so how do you process the data and how do you harness the data to drive insights that will trickle down into next action plans, right? So typically in marketing, there's a lot of data as well. So like that gave me context of how to visualize that so that you're driving insights out of that, and then making action plans based on that. And of course, when I'm running A/B testing, etc., there is an aspect of statistical significance that comes into the play, which I wouldn't have context if I wouldn't have properly studied statistics or like the data analytics part, because A/B testing plays like a very crucial role in marketing because you have to test A versus B to figure out what is working and why that seems to be doing better, right? Which will trickle down into your learnings of doing the next set of iterations and experiments. So yeah, these sort of things sort of gave me a good sort of upper hand when I went into the marketing field, where I'm not only thinking from like, okay, marketing, but also using data to make the next set of decisions, which is also crucial, right? Like, cause the whole concept of performance marketing is the word performance, where like you're being very outcome driven and being very data driven, right? So I think that for sure the whole data angle played a crucial role in terms of me making informed decisions. And over time, of course, right, like there are other aspects in terms of in marketing itself. There's like tools like Google Analytics, then there's Looker Studio, which is like your visualization tool where you can connect and then make dashboards, etc. All that are some things that I picked up, which made my job easier. Where I wanted all the all the data points that I had were presented in like quick dashboards to make things easier. And those are some things that say we still do, where like any client we onboard, we create dashboards specifically sometimes to see how we can break down metrics to get better insights, right? So I think that's what I would say.
Okay. And just an add-on question, right? So
Sure.
besides Google Analytics, Looker Studio, right? What are the other tools do you guys use, like from data analysis, visualization, or you know, just to go, look into your data, right? Do you store it some specific set of, or maybe there could be softwares, right, that you guys specifically use. So maybe
I
something.
think like at the moment, like our tech stack is pretty basic. I've kept it simple. Like we use the normal Google Sheets, etc. Then yeah, of course, the Google Analytics or this thing. Then if it's an app campaign based marketing, then there's other MMP tools that come into the play from tracking. So then we use,
Attribution tools.
yeah, attribution based tools. So those are the other tools that comes into the play. But yeah, I think like we try to keep it simple, not a complicated a lot, but then try to harness maximum insights from these tools. And then yeah.
Got it. And like when it comes to attribution tools, right? Like this is, at least in my experience,
Yeah.
one of the tougher problems in marketing, right? Because
Mhm.
you're not sure if which channel the user is coming from. You're
Yeah.
probably targeting them from multiple channels, and you're also
Mhm.
not sure, how to attribute them to that specific channel, because is there a specific time period or not? So is that a
Yeah.
problem that you guys face? Like, is this something that is a challenge that you
Yeah.
find?
This has been a challenge, right? Especially after iOS 14 update, like it's been even wider challenge for us. And even on Android front also, like MMPs are like, say, to an extent accurate, like say 90%, but there's still that 10% delta of like, say, what is not accurate. So like ultimately the goal is, okay, fine, you play around with the data that you have, but like the goal should be like where you moving the ultimate revenue needle, right? So if all the marketing efforts that you're doing is not moving that, then like say there's no point of breaking it down by channels, etc. So yeah, I think like so we look at it holistically, but also use this set of tools to kind of get a deeper insight of what is working, what is not. Yeah.
Got it. So I think, okay, understood. So basically, what you say is that at the very initial stages, I think it's more important to figure out that is the overall strategy working, making sense or not, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe you go down deeper at a channel level, which is where probably attribution becomes a problem. Got
Yeah, like
it.
I mean, attribution typically becomes an issue when, like, of course, if you're like say online only, it won't be an issue. But then if you have offline plus
Yeah,
online,
yeah,
then
yeah.
other channels, etc., is when it gets trickier, right? So I think like, of course, there are more advanced sort of strategies of like ML modeling, etc., that comes into the play, where you're trying to figure out the attribution. But yeah, I think typically most brands try to use the basic set of tools and estimations, etc., to try to figure out what channels are working well, what is not. Yeah.
Got it, got it. And so in your case, like the way you guys have figured it out is
Yeah.
when you mean M3M tools, what do you mean by them? Like
Uh, which one? MMP.
MMP, yeah. What do you mean by MMP?
Yeah,
Like,
it's basically mobile measurement platforms, right? Like
okay,
so, there are tools like AppsFire, Adjust, Branch,
yeah,
which
yeah,
integrates with your apps on the back end and then helps you track the whole funnel. Otherwise, typically you would use like a Google Firebase to track events, but of course, like the industry prefers using the whole tools to have accurate sort of measurement to make informed decisions, and then which also plays a crucial role in terms of feeding the whole pixel, right, of with the right events, so that's able to get data points of what audience is working well, what is converting better, and then helps you scale the campaign better.
All right. So MMP tools pretty much handle. I think what you would mean to say is that whatever attribution capabilities that they have pretty much meet
Yeah,
the needs, right? Like
yeah,
an overall
yeah,
way.
that's right.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Understood. So again, like if you would talk about, so besides the ones I've asked, right? So this you're a data person working for in a
Yeah.
marketing function, right?
Mhm.
What do you say the other challenges besides the ones we spoke about, or anything else that is typically a problem statement, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's also where like you have data indicating something, but you don't know the reason why that's happening, right? So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times in marketing that you know that, okay, fine, the data is skewing towards this, but you don't know the reason of like why
Yeah. Why?
this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
happening, right? So
Yeah.
like then you have to sort of hypothesize and like say try to uh, make sense out of it, but there are chances also sometimes that does not make sense.
Sure.
So you just sometimes stick to the truth, saying that, okay, fine, if this is what is working, I'll dabble down and double down on this. But yeah, I think those are sometimes where we have faced tricky situations where uh, data has saying something, but we weren't able to figure out why it's
So
indicating
how,
towards
how, do,
that,
how do
right?
you guys deal with that situation? Like, because if you're working the product side, right, if you already have a customer, then you can actually call them
Yeah,
up and check, what happened, why did you drop off, was there something weird behavior, right? But on the marketing side, you kind of can't do that because you're still acquiring the user. So
yeah.
what, like, is there a way that you guys deal with it, or there are certain set of standard
Mhm.
hypothesis of why a weird thing might be happening, or
I think like yeah, that's what these are very few cases, right? Where like say you typically most of the cases you have insight in terms of why that's happening. But yeah, I think very few cases is where like say you don't sort of have a deeper insight. And then yeah, like you mentioned, it's a matter of like say actually requesting the client to get in touch with the customer. Sometimes we ourselves try to get in touch with the customers to understand at a much deeper level, right? So I think that's the drill down again, back to the drawing board to try to figure out why it's sort of doing that, and then use other data points, right? Like other industry research, etc., to see what they are saying, and other industry people, like say if that's sort of a trend that they're also observing, etc. I think so. I think typically that's the whole way to go about it.
understood, understood. And let's say if I'm somebody who's just entering the workforce, right? I want to
Yeah,
become an analyst, and then let's say I want to focus on working in marketing and growth.
yeah.
What would your recommendations be for someone like that?
Yeah, I think like ultimately, if you want to grow in the whole digital marketing sphere, like you want to be a T-shaped marketer, right? Essentially, like how a T is, you have tech stack of like a marketing stack of all tools and all platforms. You have context about it, but you sort of niche down into one specific skill to figure out how to be the best at it, right? So, and I think a lot you have to put effort towards thinking from people perspective, right? Because ultimately marketing is understanding people, right? So asking a lot of questions about why do people do certain things, right? And if something's working well, why is it working well, right? Will sort of give you a deeper understanding about how to look at things and how to sort of uh, makes sense sort of things, right? So I think these are some things that typically you wouldn't have like a Googled answer, etc. So I think a lot of thought processes, frameworks is what you need to work towards to see how you can get the right set of answers and have the quick feedback loop to figure it out, right? So I think that's what I would suggest. And yeah, of course, being very data driven and like being sort of okay with failing and experimenting with new things is like just the attitude that you gotta have to scale things up and then grow, right? So yeah, I think that's sort of our approach. And when you're learning things, like figure out how you can implement it in the real world to get the actual world feedback, right? If you want to learn social media, start your own social media page and then sort of see how what gets uh, shares, what gets likes, what gets engagement, right? And don't sort of move too much to the fad where if you think a lot about the social media algorithm, etc. Like algorithm is made for humans, so think about what would get humans to share, right? I think
Mm.
you want to think a lot from first principles point of view and not from just a lot of the overview flashy stuff. So I think that's what I would suggest.
Got it. Got it. So yeah, like very, very like nothing very specific to marketing, but yeah,
Yeah,
like going beyond data and like really understanding the domain,
yeah,
like really knowing why things are happening, right? And
mhm,
understood. And what about let's say, you know, kind of companies that you want to work for? So
yeah,
like you worked in a place where you probably learned a lot. You actually figured out how the business works, right? And then you took
yeah.
off your own. So would there be a certain set of recommendations or way that we should approach, probably replicate or, you know, go on the same path?
I think, I mean, it depends from person to person. Like, say, uh, uh, like I preferred working to sort of skip the learning curve, right? So that like I have a lot of things figured out when I'm starting on my own. But like say there are also chances when you could start from scratch and then figure out, because like I feel the whole entrepreneurship ecosystem is like very helpful, right? Where like say if you're facing an issue, you're facing a bottleneck, you reach out to fellow founders, everybody is open to sort of give you feedback and help you out, right? Without looking for anything in return, right? So I think like say it's a matter of mindset as well that you want to inculcate, right? Because like say entrepreneurship is again like a delayed gratification aspect where you build for like the 10 years aspect and not a short term, right? So
Mm.
again, like a lot of fad around just how entrepreneurship is cool, etc., which is coming to the play. But like I think just thinking about how businesses work, what gets people by, and thinking about how to make the profits, right, is what, if you think from that perspective and think and build things around, is what would be the right way to sort of scale and grow, right? Yeah,
Would you recommend someone who, let's say, is very good with the analytical and data side of things, right?
yeah.
Let's say want to like really dig deeper into marketing and like really run it. Would you
Mhm.
recommend them joining a 0 to 1 firm or company where just still figuring things out and like really helping them scale? And would that be something that we would say teaches you a lot? Or you feel
Uh,
you need to be mentored, you need to have a more structured environment before doing something like that?
So if you're speaking of data, right, like I would actually say it's better if you want to dabble down into more into the aspect of data field itself, then it's better for you to work at a bigger organization because there's actually data for you to play around with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Typically in like a 0 to 1, there is actually very less data, right? Like there's not
Mm,
a lot of insights that you can try out
mm,
of it or
mm,
make
mm.
sense out of it. So
Okay.
of course, like with a 0 to 1 startup, you get to learn across the board where you're playing a generalist hat and like
Mm, mm,
learning
mm.
things across the board without being in isolation. But like if you want to become into the niche specific things, like you will actually learn in like the bigger companies where you have specific dedicated teams working on each of the functions, right? I think that's where you will actually drive a lot of value in terms of niche fields. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Great.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Rishabh. I think there were some like very interesting insights and a lot of things, counterintuitive things that I actually learned today. Is there
Yeah.
like any specific set of questions that I should have asked that I missed asking that probably, you could answer?
Yeah, I think like just the whole way of how marketing is going to evolve, right? I think
Yeah. Yeah.
like people in general are evolving quickly, right? So you have to adopt very quickly as well, because like just the whole evolution of like short form content has come into the play, and just how the generation change is happening, where the consumer class is going to become like say more Gen Z in the next five,
Mm,
10 years, right? So
mm,
you have to sort of be very adaptive and sort of see how what are the new things that's coming up, right? And with respect to data itself, I think that's going to be like the next big thing as well, because like of course there's already European Union who's adding a lot of data privacy
yeah.
restrictions,
Yeah.
where like
Yeah.
the cookie restrictions, etc., that's coming into the play. So that's again going to be like huge blockers for like the whole marketing field in general. So I think like say of course like playing around with data as a thing is going to become challenging, but it's around navigating through things and then figuring out how to do with the right data that you have and then achieving it, right? So I think uh, marketing plus data as a field is going to be like very evolving and like very sort of rapidly changing. And with LLMs again coming into the play, I think like a lot of use cases of LLMs would come into the whole marketing aspect as well. Like we are very nascent and like say a lot of use cases have already come up, but I think like say 2 years it's gonna be like a lot better, right? I think so. I am more excited on that front to see how AIs can capture the insights which a typical human being would
Marketing.
have
Missed or
ignored it,
probably. Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think
Interesting.
use cases of driving insights, but applying those insights to make the next sort of like learning loop, right? So I think uh, LLMs in that from that angle, I think is gonna be like quite exciting, and I believe like is like the revolutionary thing in the next few years.
Right. Right. And from WhitePath's point of view, like how do you see your journey evolving? Like, are you continue to play a role within the early stages where you like really helping these teams, get started and probably get their initial foundations correct,
Yeah.
or is it going to be more like you would want to build deeper relationships, thereby try to work with a selected set of brands, but then keep growing with them? Like, or do you want to like do you have a preference there?
I think it's we are open ended, right? Like typically we work with brands also who have decent marketing budgets because that's where we can add a lot more value. But I think we are trying to re-innovate in terms of how we look at the whole marketing as a general, not look at performance marketing or SEO in isolation, right? So we are trying to we're trying to see how we can bring in new ways of how things can be put forward, right? Like we typically right now are experimenting with new forms of like say messaging, like say typically in an advertising ad campaign you use static creators or videos. We're trying to see how you can use memes or you could use like say unique sort of video formats that captures people's attention, right? So I think those are some things that we are trying to innovate. Because like say typically over time media buying slash performance marketing is going to become very automated where like the algorithms will do those better than you, right? So there's no sort of a human involvement because 5 years back, 10 years back, it used to be like manual bidding, etc., to feed the systems. But then like Google and Meta have evolved to an extent where they are able to give you the right results, even if you're not using the right sort of very
Tools.
specific targeting signals, right?
Mm,
So I think like
mm.
now it's a lot more in terms of this has caused many people to dabble down into this. So every particular ad, every particular company is running performance marketing campaign. So every one in like say 3 posts, you would see paid advertisement. So now your objective is we're trying to figure out how do you create ads which get remembered by people, which can cut through the noise, right? So, thinking a lot from psychological, thinking a lot from like say humans thought processes point of view, we are trying to see how we can come out with framework systems to sort of crack this aspect, right? So, yeah, I
Mm.
think those are some things that we were working on, and eventually want to dabble down into that space to create the real value. Yeah.
And are there certain set of tools or products that you guys use to get
Mhm.
ideas? Or I don't know like how's the case, but I remember there used to be a tool called BuzzSumo or something, right, where you could find out the
Yeah.
trending. So are those kind of tools still in like popularity? Like are there things that firms still use, or is that something that was a thing a few years back? But
Yeah, I think like there are specific tools, right? Like Basuma, as you mentioned, you get to know what are the things which are trending. Then we use like Ahrefs Content Explorer to see what people are sort of
searching.
interested in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we again use like third party platforms like just Quora, Reddit, etc., where people are engaging a lot, right? So that's one data input that we try to see what are people inclining towards, what are their pain points. Then we sometimes actually dig deep into competitor app like competitors brand reviews itself to see what uh, the consumers might be facing and how you if you're solving that or like say if there's any specific pain points,
How do you
etc., right?
convey that? Yeah.
So yeah, I think like say the bunch of tools that we always use and like say try to see how we can drive insights
Also
around it.
digging
Yeah.
through actual forums and what people are talking about. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Right. Very interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. Great. I think, Rishabh, that's pretty much it from the
Cool.
podcast point of view.